Some people know, others don't, that when we talk about Africa's most important post-independence leaders, most often there is one man, Kenneth David Buchizia Mutepa Kaunda, popularly known as KK, who deserves more than a mention. He was president of the Republic of Zambia from 1964 to 1991. His leadership style was critical in liberating not only Zambia, but the Southern African region as well. Zambia broke free from British colonial rule in 1964. It was one of the earliest countries in the region to do so. This was evidently a good thing, but it also posed a challenge, as the young nation was surrounded by hostile white minority governments like Ian Smith, who ruled Southern Rhodesia from 1964 to 1979. Kaunda had two options: either make life easy for himself by cooperating with the colonial regimes in the neighboring countries, thereby betraying his African brothers, or risk the wrath of those regimes by supporting liberation movements beyond the borders of the newly independent Zambia. As a Pan-Africanist, KK chose the tough but noble position. He committed himself to the liberation of the entire Southern African region. He provided financial, material, and moral support to all surrounding liberation movements. Zambia became a hub of freedom fighters in Southern Africa.
But because he's white, he's of British stock, he has remained where he is for the last 13 years. Killing Zimbabweans, killing Mozambicans, killing Botswanans, killing Zambians. And he has been allowed to get away with it. We in Zambia do not accept voters' decision to make Walvis Bay, which is part and parcel of Namibia, as part and parcel of South Africa. We don't accept that.
Under KK's leadership, Zambia became a host state for military bases, training camps, and headquarters of liberation movements from Southern Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, Namibia, Mozambique, South Africa, and Angola. KK offered refuge to the African National Congress, ANC, South African Communist Party, SACP, Liberation Front of Mozambique, Frelimo, People's Movement for the Liberation, MPLA of Angola, Southwest African People's Organization, SWAPO of Namibia, Zimbabwe African People's Union, ZAPU, and Zimbabwe African National Union, ZANU, making Zambia their home.
We faced the consequences of bombings on our borders in Lusaka. It was awful. It was absolutely awful. And I remember each time there was an issue, Oliver Tambo, who was president of the ANC and who was based here, we would get him, the security get him, and they bring him to my house without even his colleagues knowing, which he used as a safe house. And he would stay in my house sometime, depending on the atmosphere outside. A week, he's staying there, no weren't allowed to go to see him, just to safeguard the leaders and to make sure that the leaders were there to provide direction.
Dr. Kaunda was one of the most admired and respected leaders in Africa. The Non-Aligned Movement, the Commonwealth, Organization of African Unity, now African Union, SADC, and United Nations, because he was a man of principles. He spoke the truth, and if the actions of any country violated a particular guiding principle, Zambia condemned it and/or voted against that action at the United Nations Assembly. Zambia also led the diplomatic attacks against the oppressive colonial governments at international forums such as the United Nations General Assembly.
Certain reactionary forces, whatever their motives, calculated to undermine recent progressive changes towards the attainment of independence in Angola and Mozambique. We view with dismay, for example, the ill-fated attempts by a band of white reactionary settlers in Mozambique who resorted to disorder and violence designed to frustrate the popular course of events towards independence. We are at the same time, however, confident that these shameful maneuvers by a band of settler desperados will be completely liquidated. In this regard, we condemn the amassing of troops by the racist and minority regimes of South Africa and Rhodesia along the border with Mozambique. This is a flagrant act of provocation and aggression against the territorial integrity of Mozambique. We equally condemn the malicious intention of mercenaries to perpetrate criminal acts against the people of the emerging state of Mozambique. We urge all countries, in particular South Africa and the Western countries, to prevent the mobilization of their nationals for such deplorable acts.
This support came at a high human, security, and economic cost for Zambia, as the country was heavily bombarded by Southern Rhodesian and South African forces. The Rhodesian government also closed its border with Zambia, a key route for Zambian copper exports via Rhodesian railways to the Mozambique port of Beira.
We had to establish so that we could export our copper and through a country, the same country, certainly, and go to South Africa, through Durban, and then see. But the problem became the route, Tanzania was going to give us an alternative route for the export of our copper, because Southern Rhodesia had declared itself and was not allowing us to use that route to be able to like that. And if we are not going to sell our copper, there will be no revenue for us to do the development which we want to do for ourselves. But it is a Zambian project, and it doesn't matter because it's in the best interest of our country and so on and so forth, and the development. And if you ask the Ministry of Finance, they will tell you that almost 80% of revenue used to come from copper. Copper, to sell it, it has got to be sold because there was no market in Zambia. We had no industries.
This was disastrous for Zambia's economy, as copper exports accounted for about 80% of the Zambian government's revenue. Despite the setback, Kenneth Kaunda and Julius Nyerere found a solution to the problem.
Mwalimu had a very special and close relationship with President Kaunda. When he died in 1999, one of the leaders who came to Butiama for the burial was President Kaunda. And I recall, as he was called to pay his last respects at Mwalimu's coffin, he stood up, and as he was walking towards the coffin, he began to sing the Christian hymn, Rock of Angels. And my sister, Rosemary, stood up and walked beside him and also began, sang with him. So this to me, someone would say this is a sad memory. No, I think it's a fond memory because it reminds us the closeness that President Kaunda had with Mwalimu.
The duo's friendship was not just a mere friendship that ended at talks, but materialized into a China, Zambia, and Tanzania relationship, which birthed the Tanzania-Zambia Tazara Railway, and eventually Zambia had a new route to transport its copper, among other exports. These tactics were meant to pressurize Kaunda into ending his support for the liberation movement. Instead, they only made KK more determined to win the liberation fight against the colonialists. The Zambian government hosted the first one-on-one talks between the South African apartheid regime and the African National Congress ANC party. These talks ultimately led to the removal of the ban on ANC, which was imposed by the South African government in 1960, and the release of the political prisoners, including key players such as Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, and Ahmed Kathranda.
You would find always Zambia speaking the same languages we were speaking about the liberation of Mozambique, and not only of Mozambique, but of the whole colonized countries, particularly in Southern Africa. In spite the vulnerability of Zambia. You know that Zambia was attacked by the regime of Ian Smith. The liberation built to host all liberation movement of Southern Africa was bombed. The same time that they threatened to bomb the State House, but they missed it by some inches because they bombed the house of the leader of ZAPO, Joshua Nkomo. So all these things, Zambia has sustained without wavering the support to the liberation struggle in Southern Africa, including Mozambique, or mainly Mozambique. Well, eventually we became independent. And so this support continued, and now in the form of a cooperation of the countries of the region to support the liberation struggle of the other countries like Zimbabwe and South Africa, which was regarded the support, and Namibia. It was regarded as the necessary thing to complete the independence of all Tanzania, Zambia, and now Mozambique. We would not feel free.
KK would also set in motion negotiations for the end of colonialism and apartheid in Southern Africa. Despite the obvious security and economic risks to Zambia, Kaunda's efforts eventually paid off. By the time he left office in 1991, the entire region, except South Africa, had been liberated. This is the reason Nelson Mandela made it a point to come to Zambia as his first country to visit after his release from prison in 1991. This was in recognition of Zambia's immense contribution to the fight against apartheid and colonialism in Southern African region. Meanwhile, Kenneth Kaunda claimed he was not driven by personal glory, but by his Pan-African principles and ideals. In light of just how much he achieved for the cause, he definitely deserves more recognition and indeed praise. President David Kaunda, a great statesman of our time, enriched Zambia, Africa, and the world as a non-violent peacemaker. A peacemaker who sought love where hatred reigned, unity where there was division, and peace in times of war. People that worked with him, both at State House and elsewhere, have different descriptions of him, although all of them point to one thing, that KK was an exemplary leader.
He was equipped with a degree of simplicity, which is difficult to match. Yes. Very difficult to match, because he is a freedom fighter, and he had been a good teacher, I'm sure. That was his strength. Yes. He was a good teacher, and he was committed to the job of a teacher. And he became Secretary General of UNIP. That strengthened him. Then he became President of ZANC and President of UNIP. So he was very, very solid and very well grounded in issues that challenged the country.
Dr. Kaunda was a selfless man in many ways. He had very little regard for material things. And this is why he was never a wealthy man. He was never a wealthy man, not because he could not have been wealthy had he wanted to, but he was never a wealthy man because of the kind of person that he was. So he was very selfless, and he sacrificed a lot from a personal perspective, but also the country sacrificed a lot under his leadership for the freedom and happiness of other human beings. His personal sense of discipline and his personal philosophy and his love for his fellow human beings was not something that he attempted to do. It was something that was inbuilt in him. It came out genuinely, and it was sincerely from the bottom of his heart.
Men as individuals, I don't think 100% would want to be on par with their women folk, no. But some of the men definitely had that wish that the female folk should also play a very important role in politics, because it's in politics where the laws of the land are made, laws which are going to affect these men and the women and their children. So the idea is that let both play a part in this legislative area. And I'm so glad you rightly said His Excellency President Kaunda saw it fit to appoint me a member of parliament in 1973.
Dr. Kaunda was a hard-working person. I remember during my time working in his office, he would come to the office as early as 6 hours. And you have to be part of it.
True, he was a teacher. He carried that profession with him even at State House. That is something we admired about him.
Kenneth Kaunda was not just a statesman, but a husband and father.
He was Bible-believing, church-going person. So we grew up like that. And then also he believed in prayer. He would always say that more is wrought by prayer than we will ever know. He was also a strict father, as I said, and he told us that we need to obey the law. Okay? And he also taught us that we should not go around saying, I'm the president's child. That was a no-no.
He would try and get there early, enough for all of us to have dinner with him. But it didn't work out well because there are times when he needed to work very late. So we found ourselves now moving back to the premises of State House because he couldn't manage to get there on time. His staff tried one time to arrange that no, instead of driving to the lodge, we keep a helicopter at State House. So that you go by helicopter to State Lodge, and he refused. He says, no, that's now being a bit extravagant, so just better bring the family back. I'll see them when I can. But what he did do, he made sure that every holiday, August, we all went to Mfue.
All in all, Kenneth David Kaunda achieved a lot for Mother Zambia and other countries and remains a respected elder statesman who used his moral authority to mediate conflict in the region. Passed away in 2021 at the age of 97, leaving behind a complex legacy, both as a father of Zambian independence and an influential African leader.